welcome to the Boiler Ball pregame show. Today it is Purdue and Ohio State here at Mackey Arena. I'm Rob Blackman. This is my broadcast partner on the radio, Bobby Riddell, and we thank you for joining us on a Sunday afternoon. Purdue and Ohio State, this is round number 2. Boilermakers winning in Columbus back on January the 5th, 71-69. Now, you say, okay, that's pretty significant, I guess, for Purdue. It's a great win for the Boilermakers, obviously, to win on the road. What also makes that game very significant, Bob Riddell, is after Purdue beat Ohio State, quite frankly, they have gone the wrong direction. They've only won one game since January the 5th when Purdue beat them at their place.
It's pretty incredible just to think Ohio State, the team of this caliber, at least from a talent standpoint on paper, could struggle to this degree after losing, the game to us. And, they had that game against the Boilermakers, won there, honestly, at the end. If they don't turn it over, where Ethan Morton's able to get that great steal in the backcourt, there's obviously a great chance they get fouled, go to the line, make a couple free throws, and are able to probably hold us off there down the stretch. But we made some winning plays there. Fletcher then, of course, hits the dagger 3. And it's really amazing just to see how they've struggled. They then had to go on the road to Maryland. We found out what it's like going on the road to Maryland. That was their next game after their loss to Purdue. They lost that one. And then they were able to get one win, and ever since then now another 7-game losing streak for them. And having to come to play Purdue in Mackey Arena when you're still reeling, not exactly the greatest medicine here for the Buckeyes.
There are a number of things from that game that, quite frankly, maybe didn't make a lot of sense, but from a Purdue standpoint, you don't care because you won the game. Fletcher may have played his worst half of basketball in his Purdue career in the first half of that game. He was so bad that Coach Painter didn't even start him in the second half. But he was so good, coming off the bench, he hit the game-winning shot. And quite frankly, in the second half, he was a big reason Purdue won that game.
His second half was unbelievable. The first shot I think he took was a 3 on the right wing in that second half, and he buried it. And you and I think, both kind of knew, okay, that's a huge shot for him because of how poorly that first half went. If you come out in the second half and you miss your first shot, all those bad negative thoughts can start to come into your head. Fletch obviously is a guy who doesn't have many bad negative thoughts. He's so confident as a young player. But for that first shot to go in for him in that second half, after your coach benches you to start the second half, that was huge for him, and he carried that momentum forward the rest of the second half, of course, ending it with that final shot that gave Purdue the lead. So it was really impressive to see a young guy struggle that severely in the first half. I think he had 4 turnovers. The guy rarely turns the ball over, period. I think he had 4 turnovers in that first half. Then for him to bounce back the way he did was really impressive.
Ohio State actually had the lead at halftime of that game. Purdue comes back to win. Another key significant happening in that game, the fact that Zed Key, the center for Ohio State, was injured very early in that game, had a shoulder injury that only played 3.5 minutes, did not play the rest of the game. That meant the freshman, Akpara, had to battle against Zach Edey. While Akpara did okay for a freshman, that's a pretty tough ask going against Zach Edey.
Absolutely. I also, was extremely impressed with Akpara and how he battled Zach. I felt like he was able to use his length at times to bother Zach. Made some plays on the offensive end. That was extremely impressive for me for a young guy like that who, we didn't really know a lot about just because as a reserve player behind Zed Key, he didn't really play very many minutes per game. So I was impressed with him to say the least, but just that wear and tear of having to guard Zach for more minutes than, a young guy would probably be to ask to do was certainly tough for him. You would like to be able to, ham and egg that with Zed Key and Akpara, both splitting minutes there. So that was a big loss for them to lose Zed Key. And he's also a guy that, is one of their better low post scorers, can score with either hand around the rim, Zed Key. And they obviously didn't have that capability to go to him at all in the second half of that game with him being out.
All right, so if you're a Purdue fan and you're thinking, all right, we got this. We're playing a team that's only won one game since January the 5th. I would caution you, Bryce Sensabaugh probably going to end up being the freshman of the year in the Big Ten. If not, he's going to finish second. And Justice Suing is as good as any player that we have in our league. They do have, and they have more than just 2 players, but those 2 can win you a ball game.
Absolutely. I mean, the offensive firepower on this team, to me, is still something that is extremely worrisome as a Purdue guy here with this team, because even though they're reeling, Bryce Sensabaugh and Justice Suing in particular, as you mentioned, those guys are high-level scorers. They've scored a lot of points this season. Justus Suing's a crafty lefty. He's big. Both those guys love to live in the mid-range area around the rim, use their size. Purdue, not a team that has a whole lot of size in the perimeter necessarily. And so those guys are going to have a chance to get going, and it's going to be paramount that Purdue slows them down because Ohio State, even though their struggles, they have to, I'm sure, have some confidence coming to a game like this because they know how closely they played us last time at their place. They, I'm sure, can lean on some of that experience of being like, okay, we can play with Purdue as far as trying to give them confidence coming into this game, which is why I think it will be paramount for Purdue to come out hot, get going early, because this Ohio State team is also just struggling with confidence in general. So if they fall down double figures early, that could be a good recipe for a Purdue blowout.
Let's talk about Purdue's confidence shooting the ball. Purdue is 2 of its last 26 from 3, if you count the second half of Northwestern and the game against Maryland. The last 3 halves of basketball, Purdue is 26 from 3. How concerned should we be as Boilermaker fans here, Mr. Riddell?
Well, I mean, it's certainly concerning. 2 road games there, relatively small sample size when you're talking about 3 halves. We've had this conversation before this year, of course, Rob.
Yes.
This team has been a little streaky, for better or worse, from long range this year. Certainly at the start of the year, some of that was masked. The poor three-point shooting was masked by the winning that was taking place. It doesn't get exemplified the same way. The poor shooting, we talked about it, we were concerned about it, but the wins were still rolling in, so we weren't really looking at it with such an extreme the way we are now. When now the losses are piling up a little bit, the poor shooting starts to become that much more worrisome because we were doing so many other things earlier in the year, and maybe it was a situation of you're playing lesser competition, or maybe you're not playing on the road, neutral site, etc., to where the three-point shooting, we were doing all these other things to cover up that poor three-point shooting to still win. Well, now you're playing against these tougher teams, tougher venues. If you don't shoot well in those games and you don't dominate some of these other categories the same way you did previous games, that's when you can end up taking the loss, right?
So let's talk about those other categories. Rebounding. Purdue got, quite frankly, its tails whooped on the glass at Maryland Thursday. It's the first time it's happened all year where Purdue not only got out-rebounded, but really got whooped.
Yep.
I know that's a concern for Matt Painter, especially offensive rebounding, something Purdue's been so good at this year, but they haven't been the last 2 games.
Yeah, you really feel for the coaching staff, right? Because the turnovers were this huge issue. Like, we got to slow the turnovers down. We were averaging basically a little over 16 turnovers a game the 3 games leading into Maryland. And then sure enough, we rectified that issue where we only have 7 turnovers. We actually only had 2 turnovers the last, 30 minutes of the game. But unfortunately, with rectifying that issue, another issue crops up when we get beat on the glass by double figures for the first time all season. And so, yeah, for the coaching staff, they had to be like, golly, man, we fixed one thing, but then another floodgate opens. So, there's enough sample size on the rebounding front that it's a pretty good thought that Purdue should get that rectified here this evening.
Now, with all of these concerns about our Boilermakers, the fact is they're still 23-4. They still have a 1-game lead over Northwestern as the day begins in the Big Ten standings. Purdue still has a clear and concise route to winning the Big Ten championship. It starts today with Ohio State, and I think you would agree with me, some home cooking here at Mackey Arena might be just what this team needs.
No question. I mean, playing on the road in the Big Ten, it's extremely hard, and it's been that way since the dawn of time, right? It was that way when I played, when Coach Painter played, and so on and so forth. Winning on the road is tough. You're likely not going to get a friendly whistle. I know Purdue fans have been a little disappointed with maybe some of the games have been officiated on the road as of late. Well, nothing better than maybe a little home cooking back in Mackey to maybe switch that around a little bit. It's just nice. We're going to have 3 of our last 4 at home, and hopefully we can build some confidence back up in our team. Maybe get a nice friendly whistle here or there, and maybe shoot well in Mackey Arena, get those percentages back up. But I think these last 4 games, to your point, where the Big Ten standings are, never more than now do we really need to take it 1 game at a time. We have a big rivalry game coming up next weekend, as we know, but we really got to focus in and handle business against Ohio State.
It's Purdue and Ohio State, 1 o'clock for the tip-off, 12 noon for myself and Bobby Riddell on the pregame show on the radio network. We hope you will join us for that one. For Bob, I'm Rob. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday. Purdue and Ohio State coming up from Mackey. Have a great weekend, everyone.